The Human Optimization Podcast is proudly brought to you by Vicon Supplements, where quality meets sustainability. Vicon's all-natural supplements are handcrafted and sustainably produced in Canada, bringing you products that nourish both your well-being and our planet. Visit viconsupplements.com today and be a part of a greener, healthier future.
Are you ready to embark on a journey to the best version of you? Join me, Lisa Pitel-Killah, as I dive deep into the world of hair tissue mineral analysis and functional medicine with fellow experts, and guide you on the path of unlocking your full potential. As a multi-time kettlebell sport world champion, I'm on a mission to reach high-performance professionals from around the world to help you minimize tiring symptoms, maximize health, and gain unstoppable energy. This is the Human Optimization Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of the Human Optimization Podcast. And I am completely ecstatic to announce our guest today, Anne-Marie McQueen. She has been focusing on the spectrum of complementary and mainstream healthcare for much of her 30-year journalism career. That includes covering the early days of marijuana law reform, holistic and alternative treatments, transgender issues and abortion rights in North America, and accessibility, solar power, and the Special Olympics in the Middle East. She's worked as a national columnist for the Sun Media in Canada, was part of the launch team and served as news, arts, and life and features editor for the national newspaper of the UAE, and was the first sustainability columnist in the Gulf. Anne-Marie is the founding editor-in-chief of Live Healthy, the only health and wellness platform for men and women in the Middle East, where she spends a lot of her time. She also launched Hot Flash Inc. June of 2020 to cover the latest clinical studies, treatments, products, guidance, and more via a weekly research letter, podcast, and across social media. Hot Flash Inc. includes some of the top CEOs, doctors, and other practitioners in the space, alongside curious, open-minded women and other folks seeking to connect the dots and find their own solutions, all part of a fast-growing global community across multiple countries. And I say near and dear to my heart because, as I mentioned, I'm right there in perimenopause with some symptoms, and I am so excited to dive in today and dive into all of that. So welcome to the show, Anne-Marie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to talk to you. And we connected through an old colleague of mine from the Sun.
Yes, Sue, absolutely.
Really cool.
She is wonderful. She's actually on vacation this week. I think she's biking across Arizona.
Oh, she's the coolest. Yeah, she always was.
Yeah. And so I always love starting the show asking, you've had a 30-year journalism career, reported on so many different things. I always want to say, you're right here, right now, doing what you're doing. Give us a little history on how you got here and share your journey with us.
Well, I was born. No, I always wanted to be a journalist ever since I can remember. And, sometimes people who knew me when I was young will say that. And I think it's just because I wanted to write. I loved writing and I wanted to write and tell stories. And, to be a journalist, you have to do a lot of grunt work in the beginning. So I started out in small town newspapers covering sheep shows and things like that. And I had to do crime. When I went to the Ottawa Sun, I saw some horrible things.
Oh, goodness.
And then I sort of made my way. I was a city hall reporter, and you're just developing skills all along the way. And when I was 27, my mom died. She had pancreatic cancer, but she was always quite unwell.
Yeah.
And I now, she had fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, but before that, endometriosis and migraines. She had a hysterectomy, and I'm trying to piece together to myself when that was, but I think she had a hysterectomy around 40 and wouldn't have had any hormone therapy. So I think that probably contributed to all her outcomes.
Yeah.
Because we're learning that you can lose your hormones naturally at the time you're supposed to lose them, but you really can't lose them all at once early. It's just not great for anyone. But losing my mom at that time, I guess now looking back, you have some spectrum, the view of what's going on. And I can see that experience really informed the stories I went after. And I ended up doing a lot of health and wellness and looking, because she had pancreatic cancer. She was a nurse. We went very traditional. anything you asked the doctors about extra stuff we could do, they were like, no, no, no. And so I just watched this all unfold, where it was just so hard to get information. Now there's just a ton of information. And then of course it all came together when I realized I was in perimenopause, because I had a really, really bad perimenopause, but I didn't know it. I didn't know
Right.
I was in perimenopause. I had no idea, even though I'd written about menopause as a kind of trend back
Yeah.
in, 2007, I think it was. I just spent a really long time in the dark between, like, 41 and 47, maybe, when I skipped a period.
Yeah.
And once that all came together, I just love content. So I just started looking for content and love it. And then just figured, I think I can probably do something here. Let me just launch something and figure out the business model of it later. I was actually modeling it on Goop, if you could believe it, because she had Gwyneth Paltrow launch Goop as a newsletter with a lot
Yeah.
more subscribers than me. But I thought, I can turn this into something and I can figure out the other stuff later.
Yeah.
So I was freelancing at the time when I did it. And I had lost a few freelancing contacts, and I thought, I'd been thinking about it for a year. I'm like, I have to do this now.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course the tools have come along, and you can just do so much. With, you can have a podcast, and you can have a newsletter, you can have your own publishing platform. So it's all kind of come together with my own midlife and my own menopause journey.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really separate any of it out.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, and I love that one of the things, you talk about your energy, your brain, how things are functioning, because I feel like one of the things that, and I think this is for everybody, not even just women, well, we're just getting older. Well, this is all part of getting older. And that's probably one of my least favorite references, right? I mean, it drives me crazy because I'm like, no, you know what? I might be in my 50s, but I feel like I'm in my 30s, and I want to continue to feel that way as I get into my 60s and 70s, right? And that, phrase, when I hear it, I just cringe, because I think there's so much more than just that.
Oh, it's terrible. It's like, why would you speak about yourself that way? Your
Yep.
body is listening to the things that you say.
Yep.
And, I read this awesome New York Times opinion piece once by a neuroscientist, and he said, as we get older, anything that happens that we forget something, we pin it on age. But he said, I
Mm-hmm.
have 20-year-old students who can't remember to bring a pencil to class. And I know I have made just clangers my whole life. Like, I've been the one driving around with my notebook on top of the car. I put my keys in the freezer. I'm just like a nut bar that way, because I have a million things on the go.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I hear this type of conversation now, I almost put it in the same category as the fat talk that women used to do, that I
Yes.
also really hated, where we'd have dinner, and then it'd come time for dessert, and everyone wanted dessert, but they wouldn't let themselves have dessert. And then the whole conversation would start like, I'm fat, I'm this, I'm that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like this with aging. It just felt like boom. And it's the way we look, but also the way we feel. And
Yep.
I have a friend here. He was an admiral. He was a Navy SEAL. He's in his
Mm-hmm.
late 60s. He can work out for 2 hours, and he just hates this talk. And I look at him and I'm like, yeah, why would I talk about the person that's most important to me when all of me can hear it?
Yep.
It doesn't mean you have to deny it. It doesn't mean you have to be a Pollyanna about it, but
Mm-hmm.
there's just so much that comes with age, that to put all the emphasis on and blame on age for some of the things that aren't going right, I just don't think it serves us.
Yep. And I couldn't agree more. And you're right. Every cell in our body responds to our energy, responds to our thoughts, responds to how we feel about ourselves, what we think about ourselves. And I do think that there was that time, practicing getting out of negative self-talk, which again, as I'm getting older, all these things that we kind of say, practicing getting out of that's really hard. Like, it takes a lot of work to change mindset.
Yeah. It's how am I going to say this? I didn't realize for so many years that I had that even.
Mm,
Like, I think you first have to realize that that's going on.
yeah.
It's so ingrained, if you've had it for as long as I did, that voice, that negative voice,
Mm-hmm.
then, I think I was 37, and just before I moved out here, I was driving with my friend who's 10 years younger, and we were driving to Mont Tremblant to ski.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was talking about dating or something, and I was letting out. I was giving away the fact that I had this voice in my head that thought there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
Like that voice that lived in my head basically was the voice telling me there's something wrong with you. You're never going to be able to whatever, whatever. And I mean, I did all the things I wanted to do, but it's just an incredible stress and burden. So I remember her saying, "How long have you been like this?" And it's like to have a friend say that is really sort of like it was such a turning point in my life because I thought, oh, like this isn't really the way that you're supposed to be. And then I started to learn such a long, Lisa, so many years it took me to
Yeah.
realize that. I remember I was wandering around about 40 saying, like, I want to write a book called The Two Yous. And I would say to people, because there's a negative voice in your head and they'd be looking at me like, but if you have those grooves, as I learned later when I did some therapy, if you have those grooves of the negative self-talk, it will just happen. But
Yeah.
it's also something that you can work at just like you can work in the gym, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
muscle. And you know this.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't mean you're walking around like in love with yourself all the time. It just means you can catch yourself and be like, "Oh, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That's
And it's interesting too because I found for myself because I went through a lot of struggles in my early 20s. And so there was a lot, I fought through a lot of that too. And again, take years of mind conditioning and, trying to put that into sport for myself. That's what that equated to me. Sport allowed me to have that outlet and be very positive and be able to kind of fight the good fight. And being able to catch yourself, and meditation was one of those. Either, and some people don't like meditation. Some people can call it, I would practice positive thinking, right? Or even visualization techniques, right? To be able to strengthen your mind, to go in the direction of where you want to go, right? And the more that you can strengthen, again, that muscle and that memory that you have going forward, I found that easier it was for me to be able to do that. But you still catch yourself sometimes going, no, thank you for coming, but that thought can go away now, right?
And if you've been like that for a long time, the strangest things can knock you sideways. Like
Yep.
I had a sort of sticky conversation going on Instagram with a very smart person,
Yep.
like someone I never would have dreamed that I would be having a debate.
Yep.
It was kind of a one-sided debate because she wasn't interested. But I woke up this morning and that was just not a nice response. And I started because the negatives talk, it was stupid of you to even start talking to this person.
Right.
You're such an like this is what I was saying to myself. She thinks you're an idiot. You're an idiot. What are you gonna write back? And then it started. And just over this person that I think is very, very smart, but I think also has some bias when it comes
Mm,
to certain issues, which
yeah.
you see in a lot of really smart people, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't, and I have my own,
Mhm.
but like this morning is a time that was enough to sort of start me going down the road. I used to walk around like that all the time and not have any idea that that was connected to that. And then and then it has a way of snaking into other things. And then this goes wrong and that goes wrong. And so,
Yeah.
my gosh, that is the most important thing you can do. If you've got, I don't know what that voice is. I've read that it's like internalized criticism from when you're a child. I don't know. I don't know why some of us have it. I think it'd
Well,
be
and
nice
it's,
to.
you know what, one of the ways I try and think about it now, and I want to get into some of the perimenopause associations with this too, but is just a little bit of deep breathing, right? A lot of people can be scared of meditation, can be scared of the mind work a little bit. But even if you have, because you're right, it's a trickle down effect of negative actions as well, right? We get caught in that hamster wheel. And then all of a sudden, it's like when we get really angry. And then the next thing that happens is bad. And then the next thing that happens is bad. And it's just like, a rolling ball of that anger that's been built up and moving forward. And I find it interesting the way that you can simply change your energy by taking a few deep breaths, right? You could be anywhere. Close your eyes, take a few deep breaths. Even better if you have your shoes off and you're able to stand in the grass, right? Ground yourself, and your entire energy changes. And what you were mad about a few minutes ago, you're not so mad about anymore, or you're not as negative anymore, right? Everything changes. I just wish anybody listening or watching right now, just do that right now and see what happens in your world, because I find that makes a huge difference.
Well, the fact that your thoughts and the actions you take can change your reality is finding that out and experiencing it starts to change everything.
Hmm.
And I just wrote about this last week on my Substack because I was talking about some perimenopause sleep problems I had.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, And then as I was writing, I realized that because I was dividing them up into three.
Okay.
And as I was writing, I was realizing that each one of them gave me an opportunity to do that. Like, for example, the first one was I had nightmares in my early stages of perimenopause.
Yes.
Sleep problems are a big issue because your progesterone is dropping early in those stages
Mhm.
and you can have a lot of anxiety. And so this is just one example. I'm having these terrible nightmares where I wake up and I'm dying. I was supposed to take a pill and I'm supposed to be on a pill every day. And when I wake up, I haven't taken the pill for God knows how long. So I'm inches away from death and I've got to find the pill. That's the
Yeah.
scenario I would wake.
Oh my
I don't know what the
goodness.
dream was. It was terrible. And I would be in my bedside table. Sometimes I'd be standing. So I went to a yoga retreat in Sri Lanka
Hmm.
and everyone started talking about dreams. And so I always think these things are interesting, right? Like
Yeah.
how I ended up in that conversation, but it's a cool group of people.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that I was having this problem and someone told me it's sort of a combination of a few different things that people do to alter what they dream about at night,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is really sort of altering your reality. So he said, just when you're going to sleep, just tell yourself there's no medication that I'm taking. There's nothing I need to do. There's absolutely, I'm safe. And the nightmares went away really quickly. And I feel like that was the on ramp for me being able to change my reality with my thoughts and the
Yeah.
things that I thought to myself and said to myself. And it just went on, it just went on. Later in my 40s, I would wake up in the middle of the night or 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. This happens a lot.
Hmm.
It's kind of a liver cleansing time, I've heard. And I
Yeah.
had the fatty liver that everyone has. And one of the problems when this happens is what's the first thing you do? Just like start flipping out
Yeah.
because you're not going to get back to sleep. You're going to be so tired. You have the morning, you have the meeting, and then you're going to feel like crap. And what do I do? And then you can't go back to sleep. And
Yeah.
so I just took all these steps. And one of them was just like, you're going to go back to sleep. It's just a few minutes. We're just going to do a couple of things. I'll be right back to sleep. I'm not going to be tired. And those little things carried in through to the rest of my life, because when you do one little change, it's like everything they say, but this is a super powerful thing that I want
Hmm.
people to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree
You
100%.
know,
Yes, it is such a small thing, but it surprises me when people don't realize, right? If they've never been through it, they don't even realize. And that is so if anybody can take anything from even this entire, I always like to have one aha moment. I hope everybody has one aha moment, right? That's why we do this. That's why we're talking and why we share, right? If they can have one aha moment, that would be the one, because it is such a simple thing to be able to change your energy. And and so let's talk a little bit about, because I know for myself, when I entered perimenopause a few years ago, I don't have a ton of symptoms anymore, but I definitely did then with regards to sleep. You mentioned that one, right? So it's like, I thought, why am I not sleeping? And then I'm like, oh yeah, it's because I'm 48, 49, right? I'm at that age. I'm like, I know what's happening. But that wasn't the only
yeah.
one, right? There was, even with gym and healthy eating and supplementation and doing all the right things, there was a little bit of weight gain and a lot of water weight, right? I had, there were days where I couldn't see my ankles and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
So little
That's scary.
things. Yeah, little things just with regards to symptoms. And so, share a little bit about just some of the ones that you find are most common and the ones that people seem to be struggling with the most.
Well, everyone talks about all the range of wacky symptoms, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we have an array of hormones, and we have estrogen, we have receptors for them all over our bodies. And progesterone is dropping, estrogen is rising and falling and dropping, to
Yeah.
testosterone is dropping a little, and then all the others. And so it's like an orchestra that's kind of like gone kerflooey.
Yeah.
So everyone talks about the weird ones, phantom smells and burning tongue and itchy ears and all that stuff. And I had a lot of that.
Hmm.
But I think when people talk in a way that's life altering, well, that stuff is scary because it makes you wonder if you're dying. And I think a lot of people in perimenopause just think, as I did, there's something really wrong with me and I just
Right.
don't know what it is yet,
Mm.
right? It's just
Hmm.
hard not to walk around in a state of health anxiety
Yeah.
when you're having random symptoms. And I used to say things to people like, do your arms tingle? Do you ever get this like weird, do you ever get chest pain? And then no one knew what I was talking about because you're just trying to find some footing. But I think really the biggest ones are anxiety, sleep problems in different permutations throughout early and late perimenopause. Um, the anxiety is super hard because it permeates everything. And,
Yeah.
I had nightmares, but some women develop a fear of driving or they just
Mm.
don't, I developed a fear of flying as well. You just
Mm.
lose confidence.
Yeah.
and your thinking can go awry. I had quite a obsessive thinking problem. And
Yeah.
I was sort of just in always swirling. And sleep is a huge issue. And hot flashes are an issue and an issue at night. But I feel like it's more of these other things that are really screwing people up. And then, of course, menopause is kind of like perimenopause is, I compare it to when the tide goes out and you just see a bunch of garbage left on the beach. It's whatever you bring into
Yeah.
perimenopause. And even if you're healthy,
Yeah.
I was always a quote unquote healthy person, but I always overworked. I always overexercised. I was always very hard on myself. I had stuff from my childhood I hadn't dealt with. I had trauma from my career, bad things I saw in the beginning. And I brought all that to perimenopause and then tried to deal with the way I was feeling with my habits from then, which is like be harder on myself, plan more, work out more, stricter diet. And so, it's hard when those things don't stop working.
Right.
And that happens to a lot of women. And then the sense of, you're in a real transition period. And sometimes you don't even know you're in it and you don't know how long it's going to be. So there's just this sense of a complete loss of footing, like just a real feeling of being lost and in the dark. And that's very, very important to recognize in people because it's, a lot of people have suicidal ideation during this time. And I was no different. And those are really, really dark, scary times. And then I've been writing always saying this is going somewhere good. And I've had people argue with me because of course there's a lot of people who want to paint this as a destination rather than a transition. But I've always said, look at all the happy, healthy old women you see walking around that don't give a care in the world and they're just having a grand old time. I'm going to look to them when I'm having a really hard time and research back that up. And so I would just say this is going somewhere good. And to keep your eye on it and to know like nothing has lasted forever, but this is kind of the mother of all transitions, Yeah. This is, this is every other transition you've been through on crack, I think.
I agree. And you know what? It is, I feel like it is a necessary time for each individual woman to regain and find her confidence with that footing, right? Because you're right. The ways back when that you used to take control to be able to, lose 5 pounds or fit into whatever, or run that road race or do whatever you used to do, it doesn't work anymore. It's just different, right? And so that just kind of turns the world upside down for a little while. And so we have to find the new ways to be able to accomplish the things that we want to accomplish. And that takes a strong will to be able to work through that and be there. So that awareness is key. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a real, I don't want people to get lost in the physical symptoms, although those are overwhelming, and the emotional challenges. It also is a huge psychological transition and you'll come out of it better. And just, you will. I just feel more in myself than I ever have before. But I think it can be very, very challenging.
Yeah, I agree. And so tell me with regards to, so I was looking at Instagram and I follow you on Instagram as well. And you were talking about estrogen maximalists.
Yeah.
Let's dive into that a little bit. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I want to hear more about that. You were comparing
that'll
it
probably
to
make people mad.
Right? You were comparing it to Bitcoin. I was like, well, and I do. I once you share, I'm going to give my opinion too because I think that we have some common beliefs.
Well, okay. First of all, I think hormone therapy is a wonderful thing. And I think it's helping so many people and women are really suffering. I just had a long conversation with one of my best friends. She's considering it. I'm like, I don't ever want you to think I'm not. I just want people to know that there's a lot of other things going on and to make sure that this is a time to get our health together. This is a time to pull it all together. I had a health explosion and it's the time to figure it out. But yeah, I invest in Bitcoin. It's funny because I just was watching Michael Saylor. He was speaking at the Bitcoin conference. I was just watching that this morning and he was talking about Bitcoin maxis, double maxis and triple maxis. And I was laughing because I was like, oh my God, they're totally our estrogen triple maxis. So the only reason I say this is because we have other hormones and even more abundant hormones. And estrogen is made by testosterone in our ovaries, and progesterone is the hormone that sort of tips us off into perimenopause. Yet there's most of the conversation is captured by estrogen.
Yeah.
Estrogen, 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 like Marsha from the Brady Bunch. And
Yep.
so I just find it very odd. And I'm not in the medical communities. And I think it's just really easy to boil it down to one hormone.
Yep.
And it's been the focus of menopause, since they discovered it.
Yeah.
And I don't understand it. And I think it does it disservice. It's just a much more nuanced conversation. And the suggestion that perimenopause is because your estrogen is dropping off a cliff. You're not supposed to live longer than 50 years old. It makes sense. So you top up your estrogen, problem solved. That's what you need. You need that to avoid disease. That's your answer to everything. That's the conversation. It's just like really tiresome and it's not accurate.
Yep.
And it's misleading. And there's just so many reasons. And I just think it's funny. So I've developed that term, but I think I probably make people mad.
Well, you know what? You're entitled to your opinion, and that's right. That's what this is all about.
Yeah. And I'm just saying there's other hormones that are important and they all work together. That's
100% couldn't agree more. And I see so many times in practice, right? I've been in clinical practice for over a decade and dealing with minerals and again going through my own, perimenopause journey. And I see so many times, and again, you're right, hormone replacement therapy in certain situations, 100% can be done, and it can be done right, and it can be really helpful. But you see so many times as well, and I see it more now in the last maybe year and a half to 2 years than I ever have in practice, that women are only getting estrogen. And you're right, it's like, yep, this is the magic answer to your problem, right? But we have to remember that even throughout the journey, right, that journey in perimenopause, kind of transition to menopause, the hormones are constantly, again, playing a tune, and they're changing to a certain extent. And so this is why sometimes we'll go through, even myself, sometimes I'll go through periods where, again, right in the initial, I had trouble sleeping and a few symptoms. I changed the way I was eating and my supplementation and just routines that went away. But then there's phases of when it comes back. Right? And that's a change and a bump. So if we don't take those changes into account and we just keep taking the same thing, and again, without the other hormones to really keep things in balance, we could actually be making things worse when they could be getting better on their own, right? And I think the part that I get frustrated with, and I know you talk about this as well, is that, one of the main supports, even after menopause for sex hormone production, is your adrenals. Well, what are we all running around stressed? Our adrenals are under constant stress. And then we have caffeine, which is stimulating these already tired glands that are trying to support our body in this way. And how can we possibly expect our body to have, the sufficient amount of sex hormones by glands that are just exhausted? So that's another huge part of this conversation, right?
It's a huge part. And if you ever try and intentionally rest and do things like sound healing and yin yoga and breath work and nurturing yourself and watch yourself come back to life, then you can see how that works almost in real time, and how you start to become brittle and like cardboard and grinding yourself down when you don't. It's quite something. And the thing is with the hormone conversation, I mean, I've had this explained to me by experts, and it's also just common sense that if your estrogen is rising and falling, and if you have high estrogen, as people do during perimenopause, and low progesterone, it doesn't really make sense to give that person more estrogen. Like I had times in my perimenopause where my breasts were very, 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 very sore. Like so much so that I would just be like, don't walk near me. Like, I don't want to puff of air. Like, and I now know that's high estrogen. And then those were times that I was really like, I was like this. And so I just don't see why or how estrogen would help during that time.
No.
And then there's a lot of issues where there's a condition, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but where your body gets used to higher and higher and higher levels of the hormones, and it's not a great situation to be in.
Yeah.
So I just feel like low and slow is a really good way to go into perimenopause, right? Like a
Yeah.
ramp. If you're gonna think about hormones, go low and slow.
Yeah.
The other thing that doesn't make any sense at all is that there's women walking in, probably too many women walking in for hysterectomies
Mm-hmm.
in their 30s with a full complement of hormones and walking out, and they're lucky because women still aren't getting hormones after their surgeries.
Yeah.
If they are, they're just being given estrogen because now they don't have a uterus or ovaries, and they don't need the progesterone to offset the estrogen because they have no uterus. That makes no sense
No
to me. You
sense.
walk in the surgery, you've got all your hormones, you walk out, you only need estrogen. Like, how could that be?
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree.
Sorry,
And
I got
and
excited.
right. And I feel like at the end of the day, it's taking something that's, and this happens in so many different realms of health, right? We take something that's very complicated and we're trying to simplify it, but we're missing so many pieces of that simplified puzzle, right? And really important pieces. And you're right, I think this is a time where we have to just allow ourselves to be in a joyful place, practicing our relaxing things, going on our walks, doing that exercise that we love, and just being able to nourish our body through the change, right? And not trying to fight it and fight through it as well, because there's many ways to be able to do that. What's one of your favorite tips for someone who's getting in, just kind of making their entry into perimenopause? What's one of your favorite tips to give them with regards to just lifestyle, diet, nutrition, whatever kind of suits your fancy to share? Or top 3 tips, something like that.
I feel like if I did all the things I wanted to do, I would just be doing things all day long. Like some days I'm like, Emery, you cannot do all these things.
Yeah.
During COVID, I was worried about sleeping. I was alone, and I started doing yin yoga every night or stretching or foam rolling.
Yeah.
And I slept like a baby. And that's when I realized the connection between doing that. So I will do that instead of watch a television show if I'm being, pretty good. I'm not too
Yep.
naughty, and I will regret it if I don't. And if I do it every night, I will have such a great night of sleep. And you don't have to do more than 20 minutes.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
it is so, so worth it to do that for yourself. And I think getting outside in nature, I walk in a park near my house without shoes on. I'm that crazy person. And I need to do that. It's like I'm plugging myself in.
Yeah.
And the further away I get, if I skip those morning park walks, it's very hot here in Abu Dhabi, so I'm having to do it at 6 a.m.
Yep.
I start feeling weirder and stranger and more disconnected with myself. And I think of how many people are walking around who haven't touched a tree, or like, we need this. This is an electrical charge situation. And if you just go do it, float in the ocean, I don't know what, sit in your backyard, you can literally feel yourself calm down. That's one of my top tips.
Yeah.
Sleep is so much better. And if you get morning sunlight, everyone talks about morning sunlight, but it's true. It's very effective.
Yeah. Reset your circadian rhythm. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. And, and I mentioned kind of walking without shoes and socks earlier in the grass, especially just because it's such an amazing, again, attachment to the earth, grounding ourselves and letting us just be where we should be, which, and again, in nature, it's just one of the amazing spectacles that we overlook so often.
We are nature. I'm obsessed with the things in our body that look like things in nature. Like, the our trachea reflects like tree branches, and our eyeballs look like the inside of carrots. Like and they're good for our eyes. Like, this is just, the trees in our breathing. Like, I just love stuff like that. One other tip I would give, and I never hear anyone talk about this supplement. I'm not a supplement pusher, but if you're not quite ready for hormone therapy, or you're having hot flashes, you're having trouble sleeping, a supplement that really helped me, and I just found it out in a Facebook group, is called Pitel-Killah, and it's a French maritime pine bark. It's made from that tree.
Yeah.
And it helps to boost nitric oxide. There's a lot of research backing it up. It's an antioxidant, and I really found that helped me. It's expensive because it's standardized, which is rare in
Yeah.
supplements. And
Yeah.
I just find that's effective. I'm not giving anyone medical advice. I'm not a doctor, but that really helped me. That really helped
Amazing.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so share, how do people get in touch with, because you obviously are on Substack, right? So people can find you there. Tell us a little bit about that so they can get into this and into the community.
Okay, so I have a community over on Substack.
Mhm.
I have a free weekend newsletter. I have a paid tier where I do some deeper dives and research, but you can join either way. You just go over into the Substack community and there's great writers over there. I have a weekly podcast that you can just listen to. It's wherever you get your podcasts. It's a hot flashing podcast. And I'm
Nice.
on the social media. So I'm on TikTok and Instagram and X, and I'm making videos and sharing reels and sharing interviews with my guests. I've had over 100 episodes of my podcast.
That's
You know what that's
amazing.
like. So
Yep. No,
it's so
that is
interesting.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so
Well,
interesting talking.
you know what, and that's where all these conversations come from, right? And that's why they're so amazing because, again, if somebody can watch, listen, have an aha moment and change their life, I mean, that is why we do what we do and share as much as we can, right? So, okay, so
Yeah.
we're going to have all of the links for Anne-Marie in the description. So again, Hot Flash Inc., that's on Instagram, hotflashinc.com. And yeah, thank you so much for being with us all the way from Abu
Thank
Dhabi
you.
today. This was absolutely amazing. I'm just, so hearing your journey and just some of the things that you talk about is really, really amazing. So for those of you listening on your favorite podcast host, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Give it a thumbs up. And for those of you watching on YouTube, please subscribe to my channel. We're here every couple of weeks with a brand new guest, and give this episode a like, and we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us today on the Human Optimization Podcast. Episode technical production is by Grace Sylvester and guest booking by Stu Tate. Want to learn more? Visit Pitel-Killah.com for incredible free resources to supercharge your journey to becoming the best version of you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe to the Human Optimization Podcast and follow me on social media at Lisa Pitel-Killah.